Hi, good afternoon. My name is Dallas Flick. I'm an associate at Crawford, Wishnu and Lang in Dallas, Texas, and I'm a co-chair of the DAYL Wellness Committee. I appreciate you all being here today. We're really excited to bring this presentation to you all today. This is the third iteration of our CLE series titled "It's Okay to Not Be Okay." This year and at the end of last year, the Wellness Committee began a very heavy focus on programming regarding mental health in the legal community, not only in Dallas, but statewide as well. And if this is your first time watching one of our CLEs, I highly recommend seeking out the video recording of the first two CLEs in the series. In the end of last year, we did a CLE on anxiety and depression and mental health and other related mental health issues that young lawyers may face. And in December of 2023, we did a CLE on alcoholism and substance abuse. Today, we're going to be focusing a little more on the rights and the resources that a lawyer may have or a legal professional when confronted with any kind of mental health issue, or frankly, any big life event that may cause any kind of disruption either to your personal life or to your professional life. We've discussed at length in previous CLEs with past panels that it's not really a surprise that the legal profession is a strenuous one, and it's stressful, and it can take a heavy toll on someone in their mental capacity as well as their physical capacity. And aside from just learning about those issues on a personal level, it's important to know what options you have in your professional life so that both aspects of your life don't necessarily have to take a backseat to the mental health issues you may be confronted with. So that is what we're going to be focusing on today. And with that, I'd like to just briefly introduce our panel, and I'll let them tell you a little bit more about themselves. First, our non-lawyer on the panel, which we're always very excited to have in this series, is Alicia Freeman. She is a licensed professional counselor, or an LPC, with the Texas Lawyers Assistance Program, or TLAP, which we'll be talking a lot more about today. Next is Ashley DeWeese, a partner at Barnes and Thornburg here in Dallas. And lastly, Camille Avant, a partner at Crawford, Wishnu and Lang in Dallas as well. Alicia, why don't I start with you? Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Hi, everyone. So I'm glad to be here today, although my allergies are certainly like getting the best of me, but we'll work through it. But yes, I am a clinical professional with TLAB. I've been with them for about 2.5 years, but I've worked with the State Bar of Texas for a little bit over 5 years. Prior to working at the State Bars, I'm actually from Mississippi, and so I worked in a lot of community mental health. I've been in the mental health field since 2016 with a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. And so from there, I've worked with ages 6 to 65. Majority of my clients that I've worked with in the past had substance use as well as mental health issues. And so working at the State Bar of Texas, starting off in CLE and hosting a lot of CLE events for attorneys is kind of what prompted me to see that there was definitely a need for more therapists and more LPCs in the legal field in regards to talking about mental health. And so that's kind of how that transition happened with me. My previous director told me about the TLAP position, and I'm here going on 2.5, 3 years. And so I'm definitely glad to be here to talk about TLAP, as well as just some resources that are available to you or maybe someone that you know.
It's fantastic, Alicia, and thank you for joining us today. Again, we're used to going to CLEs that are predominantly attended and paneled by lawyers. So having someone outside the legal community with an important perspective like yours is always appreciated. Next, Ashley, why don't you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Ashley DeWeese, and I have had the pleasure of meeting so many of you throughout the years with my involvement in DAYL. By way of quick background, I'm originally from Frisco, Texas, now a booming community. And then after that, I went on to get my bachelor's degree in psychology with a minor in business from the University of Texas at Austin. And then, of course, went to get my JD at SMU Dedman School of Law, where I was on the SMU Law Review as well as in Women in Law. Now I have a pretty successful practice at Barnes and Thornburg, with a national focus, primarily in the transactional field, focusing on commercial real estate, commercial business transactions, corporate M&A, and private equity. So pretty diverse practice, primarily focusing on real estate. But I am here to talk about the resources that my firm has given to us in that capacity.
Appreciate it, Ashley. Thank you. Next, Camille, why don't you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. Camille Avant. I'm a partner here at Crawford, Wishnu, and Lang. I'm also board certified in employment and labor, meaning that all I do is employment and labor matters 24/7 all day long. I represent both employers and employees, so I'm very familiar on both sides of the coin on what employers desire from employees and what employees desire from their employers. Although I practice in a wide array of different employment and labor matters, the main focus for today is I am heavily involved in accommodation request, FMLA request, on both the employer and the employee side. I counsel employers and HR in if they get requests, how to handle those requests. And I also counsel employees on if they are requesting leave, how to go about doing so. So my focus here today is letting you all know the resources that are available to you in requesting accommodations or any type of leave from your employer with regard to mental illness.
Thank you, Camille, and appreciate you joining in as well. A few things before we get into it. There are open question and answers down at the bottom of your screen if you're attending. Feel free to drop in a question anytime. We'll try to reserve some time at the end of the hour to answer any unanswered questions. Otherwise, if there's a question that is specific to a particular speaker while they're going over their topic of interest, I'll do my best to try to field those. Lastly, a few of our speakers will have a few slide decks to go through. If you're having trouble viewing it, you might be able to adjust your settings at the top right of your Zoom window. You can change the view settings to speaker or to standard, and that should make it to where you can see everything very clearly. So let's talk about, just at the beginning, I wanted to get into a quantitative sense of what mental health issues could look like for young lawyers and legal professionals, both in Dallas and statewide. So Alicia, I guess one question I would have, just from your clinical perspective in dealing with the population of lawyers, just any information that you have as to how frequent or how often you see or TLAB sees young lawyers dealing with mental health issues, either from a counseling perspective or just through data collection that TLAB has done.
So one thing that TLAB does is we accumulate over a year span how many calls we receive. We do not keep that of who calls us, their names or anything like that. We just simply track the type of calls that we receive. So we get, I think last year was around 5,000 calls total for that year. And most of those calls were mental health, which over the last, especially since COVID, majority of our calls have been mental health related, whether that's anxiety, depression, a combination of both suicidal ideation, or has maybe had an attempt in the past and wants to get some help for that. And then the rest of our calls, are substance related. So alcohol is a major one. We see a lot of cocaine use, and some people are more open about their use, some are not. But how our calls typically happen is someone calls in, it's confidential. They tell us, hey, I'm really struggling with one of these things or maybe multiple things, and I need some resources. I do want to clarify that a lot of people think that calling TLAP automatically means that they're gonna receive counseling directly from us. That's not how our program works. We provide the resources to counseling or to a substance use facility, inpatient, outpatient, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But we are the middle person or the middle program that you reach out to. We're confidential. We're also a reporting agency, right? So you don't have to report to the BLE. By calling us and saying, hey, I have a concern about this attorney or law student or judge, that's you doing your ethical duty. And we do not contact anyone else saying that, hey, we received a call. We remain that confidentiality. But again, out of those 5,000 calls, I would say about 65% of them are mental health related. And overall, when we talk about young lawyers versus those who've been practicing for 20, 30 years, the differences aren't much unless it's a cognitive related issue. And typically that's due to aging or it's due to a medical issue. But other than that, you have anxiety, depression, imposter syndrome, struggling with law school and just being able to adapt. We've gotten calls from law students a lot, just preparing for the bar and feeling overwhelmed by that. And so we do something specifically for them, which is support sessions where we kind of like help navigate a little bit more on the resources available to them and how they can get additional support as well.
That's very helpful. I didn't know that TLAP was a reporting agency. That's actually really, that's a good piece of information to have. And you touched a moment ago on that there isn't a large disparity in what the subject matter is between young lawyers and old lawyers. Do you think that there is a disparity in who's more likely to call or reach out to TLAP between those separate populations?
Honestly, no. I feel like now that TLAP has been more visible to law firms, to law schools, that we're getting calls from everyone. There isn't a specific age group that we're seeing more of. I will say, depending on the time of the year, yeah, we'll probably get more calls from law students around orientation because we were just in the schools during orientation, right? Or the holidays, we might see more people who've maybe experienced grief or a loss of a significant other or concerned that, hey, there's a lot of holiday parties going on. So we might see an influx of substance related calls during the holidays. But as far as the age, no.
That makes sense. And that's good to know that the transparency helps. And we'll talk a lot more about what programming and resources TLAP offers to lawyers in a few minutes. I wanted to start with, or I wanted to move to more of the rights that a young lawyer may have or any lawyer may have if they are confronted with their own mental health issues. And this is specific to within the employee-employee relationship. So Camille, I just wanted to start with you, just a general question. Suppose myself or any other lawyer had a mental health concern that they thought would affect their job performance, aside from having just an informal conversation, maybe with their direct supervising attorney or a managing partner. What are the formal requests, if you had to give them buckets, that a lawyer can make to either to quite literally give an accommodation or to take any informal steps they need to give more attention to the concerns they have?
First and foremost, it is direct communication. A lot of times we will skirt over statements that we're making or our mental health or whatever it may be, and being able to communicate directly with whether it's your employer, your HR, your supervisor, whoever you're communicating with, you need pretty direct communication of, I am struggling because of a mental disability. And those are the words that need to be said in order to trigger the protections that you as an employee will have to afford you leave and accommodation for your mental illness. A lot of employees also, when they think of, well, I have a mental illness, I need leave, they immediately go to FMLA, which is leave under the Family Medical Leave Act. And the problem with that is a few things. One, it requires your employer to employ more than 50 employees. So that immediately eliminates all of your boutique firms that may have employees less than 50. 2, it requires you to be employed by your employer for a 12-month period and work 1,250 hours in the 12-month period prior to you requesting leave. And so what that does is if you start a new job and within 3 months you're struggling mentally, you're without recourse under the FMLA to get any type of assistance. What employees oftentimes do not know is that the Americans with Disabilities Act provides some helpful tools and accommodations that employees could have in order to help alleviate mental illness that they're having within the workplace. The requirements under the ADA are less stringent. And so usually that's the best course of action to start with. It's really an interactive process with your employer, your HR, whoever you're requesting to leave with. But it's a big picture of, I am struggling mentally and I need an accommodation. And in that accommodation, it's an interactive process with your employer. But the big issue is, do you have a physical or mental impairment that is affecting or substantially limiting a major life activity? And what people often think of is, well, I'm not disabled because my leg isn't broken, or I'm not disabled because I can carry things to and from the workroom to my office. Major life activities are actually much broader than that. And they include things like caring for yourself. Can you communicate? Can you concentrate? And can you interact with others? And usually from my experience, it's those type of major life activities that get affected by someone's mental health. And if that is you and you fall into that category, requesting accommodation from your employer is something that you should highly consider.
Used a phrase earlier, and I think you made a great point that you used the phrase, do you have, or I am suffering because I have a mental disability. I wanted to just follow up on that. Do you, in your experience, does the mental disability or the mental health issue have to be easily categorized, or is it as simple as, I had a traumatic life event happen and now I'm having trouble focusing at work, or I'm losing sleep over it, it's affecting work? Like, how general can it be to where it's still actionable?
Extremely general. What needs to be stated is something along the lines of that you have a mental impairment that is substantially affecting your major life activity. That is the standard under the ADA. And as long as you are satisfying that standard, you should be protected, and they should engage in whatever process at that point to help accommodate, as long as you can perform the essential functions of your job.
So let's say that your employer is willing to find some type of accommodations. What may that look like? Like, if from a day-to-day perspective for a lawyer, like, what kind of accommodations have you seen that have been effective or recommended if you're representing an employer, for example?
Yeah, so I guess a couple points before going into that.
Mhm.
One of the biggest mental illnesses that I see that on both the employer and the employee side that we're always dealing with is anxiety. And using the word anxiety does not give you any type of protection, because anxiety does not mean that it's affecting your major life activity. And anxiety may or may not mean that you can perform the essential functions of your job. So understanding what your mental illness is most important. And so, for instance, if my mental illness is I cannot focus 8 hours straight in the day, whether it's anxiety or some other mental illness, it's understanding what you are unable to do in your job. That's step number one. And then once you can classify that, the bigger picture is, remember, you are asking for an accommodation at your job. At the end of the day, firms are a profit center. They cannot pay you if they cannot make money. And so you requesting time off, you requesting leave, you doing anything that may be affecting them and their ability to make money is a problem. And so you have to maintain your marketability while maintaining your health. And what I mean by that is remember that your employer is more motivated on getting a financial gain at the end of the day. They probably care about you and they probably care about your health, but at the end of the day, it is a business. And as long as you go into the accommodation process with that in mind, I think the accommodation process and the interactive process can work a lot better because now you're thinking outside the box. And so going to your question directly, let's say that I'm having trouble focusing throughout the day for a straight 8-hour period. And so I want my accommodation to be that I need a hour break in the middle of the day, or maybe I need a 2-hour break in the middle of the day. I need to, before I go to my employer, think internally with myself, which is, how can I request this accommodation? Because when I say it to my employer, he or she might be taken aback as in 2 hours. No, you can't take 2 hours, but maybe it's, I need 2 hours in the middle of the day, but I will make them up or later in the week. I will find a way to make sure that I'm still maintaining my hours, because their main goal is to make sure that they're able to achieve the requirements they set out for their employees. And so as long as you are continuing to think about that when you're engaging in the interactive process, employers would be more willing to consider what you're asking. And so whether it's you want an accommodation to close your door in the middle of the day and turn off your email and turn off your phone and close your eyes for 30 minutes, that's a reasonable accommodation to the extent your employer is willing to work with you on that. And in my opinion, if you're able to make up those hours somewhere else, they're usually okay with that. You can also request I need to work every other Friday off. I need a day to myself during the week in order to maintain my health. And in accommodating that, you can say, look, I can do that. And I promise, during that month, I will make up those hours that I may be missing. You don't always have to provide an alternative to make up hours. But in my opinion, it goes over easier with your employers when they feel like you're taking their interest into consideration. And so at the end of the day, remember, we are attorneys, and the interactive process to get an accommodation is a negotiation process. There's no set rhyme or reason rules to how you get an accommodation. It's all about, what do you need in order for you to perform your job duties in a way that maintains your mental health, that doesn't severely disrupt the business activities of your firm. And as long as you can find a balance between those two things, the options are wide and vast as to what your accommodation could be.
You've hit on a theme that I think we're gonna see a lot more during the rest of the hour, is that ultimately, from a firm or an employer perspective, the impetus to create these accommodations, to care at all about the mental health of their employees, may be profit driven, which, personally to me is gross, but it is what it is, right? That's just the world that we live in. So one follow-up question I had on that is, aside from just the profit driven aspect, what other incentives, or why else should employers care? And maybe a more specific question from that is, what can they do to ensure that this is sustainable for them? Whether it's providing these accommodations to everyone at the firm, or making the availability more overt for the employees. What types of changes would you like to see at the firm level?
I think big picture is marketing yourself as in, if I am good with my health, if I feel great internally, if I can show up to the workplace today and know that mentally I can focus on my task, that just makes me a better attorney. It makes me a better attorney. It makes me a more efficient attorney. I can bill more. I can provide more to the firm. Whereas I can sit in an office for 10 hours in a day. But if I am not mentally able to show up that day, it doesn't matter how long I sit in that office. The product that I am dishing out is just not going to be sufficient. It's not going to be good. And so letting them know, I am trying to make myself most marketable for you, most profitable for you. And the only way I can do that is if my mental health is maintained. And again, going back into, if my mental health is maintained, that is more profitability for you on the back end, as opposed to me looking at a pleading for 30 minutes. And then after 30 minutes have passed, I realize I have no idea what I just looked at. And now you're having to backtrack and do a bunch of things. Whereas if you are focused mentally, your ability to achieve tasks are a lot greater. And so I think letting them know that my mental health makes me a better attorney is really important in communicating with them.
Thank you, Camille. I appreciate that. And I guess one final question I have for you before we move back to Alicia about TLAP and other resources outside the firm level. One concern that I know that I've heard from people within my network and just in the mental health profession is any kind of fear of retaliation or just disparate treatment by an employer. What assurances or feedback would you give to those concerns if you were an individual that were seeking these kinds of resources from their firm?
Yeah, and this goes back to my initial point when we were discussing accommodations in general and why it's really important on how you communicate the accommodation you're requesting. You stating I have anxiety and I can't do this is insufficient. You need to make sure that your employer understands that you are requesting a right under a statute that exists, that you have a mental impairment that's affecting your major life activity. And it's affecting me in the sense that I can't focus all day, or I mentally just can't show up and be present, whatever it may be. But as long as you're explaining to them that this is a disability and you are requesting an accommodation because it's affecting your major life activity, those are the trigger words that gives you the protection to where retaliation is an option if you are retaliated against. And, you know, from that point, I will tell you, as we all know, you cannot prevent determination, you cannot prevent retaliation, but employers absolutely think twice if you have requested your accommodation correctly to taking some action against you, because it is a whole lot easier to prove a retaliation claim than you're able to prove that they failed to accommodate you sufficiently. And so they're less likely to retaliate as opposed to failing to engage with you on the initial process. So once you take that step and you're requesting that accommodation, as long as you're communicating it in the way that gives you those protections with those trigger words, you've done what you needed to do in order to protect yourself.
Makes sense. And, you know, I appreciate that the underlying theme for what you discussed is you started off with direct communication, right? And I know just from personal experience that it's one thing to be honest with yourself about what a mental health issue may look like. It's a whole other thing to put on a brave face and go talk to your employer or even your HR rep and say, hey, look, I need to start a dialogue about X. So on that note, I do want to move back to you, Alicia, just for a few minutes to talk about TLAP. And, you know, there's an anonymity aspect and a confidentiality aspect that I think would be attractive as a starting point for a lot of young lawyers who are coming to terms with, you know, maybe I'm not all good, you know, like maybe it's as informal as just a starting phone call, or maybe it's I'm looking for some type of counseling or other sort of professional help outside of the firm or even just outside my circle of friends or family. So if I wanted to reach out to TLAP and I you happen to pick up the phone, Alicia, what would you tell me the resources available to me would be?
Which is very likely, by the way. I'm certainly one of the people.
Hey, fair enough.
Yeah.
I would take comfort in that, knowing you're the lady from the CLE panel I saw. I love that.
Well, I thought first off, Camille brought up some really great points that I think kind of transitions into this topic because a lot of people don't know how to articulate how that anxiety or depression is affecting them. And that's something that when people call, we have those conversations with them, like, what does this really look like? Especially you brought up law students earlier, Dallas, and a lot of law students are just now starting to feel this because they're in their first and second year of law school. And they're like, I've never experienced this before. I don't know what's really going on. I just know I can't concentrate. And just being able to talk through that gives them more information on how they're struggling. So when it comes to TLAP, yes, this is exactly what happens. Our 1-800 number, and I can show this information. I'll go ahead and share my slides if that's okay, Dallas.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Okay, so what you see on the screen is all the resources we provide. If there's something that is more specifically that you're looking for, we can talk through that and we can figure out an answer to it. But if you
Mhm.
call our 1-800 number, first off, we're available 24/7. You can call or text and it's still confidential. We do not keep any records. So if John called to talk about himself or John called to talk about Sally, right? We do not keep track of those names and information. We do sometimes request emails just to send you resources, but we are protected under law to where we don't have to report any emails or any information like that. So it's important for people to know that calling us to report another attorney, a lawsuit, or a judge, again, you are covered under your ethical duties by calling TLAP. We do not call anyone else. We do not report that information to anyone. So as we talk through whatever you're struggling with, and we figure out, okay, it sounds like you need counseling. What we do is we find out the area that you're located and we look for referred licensed professionals. So first off, I didn't mention this, but we are celebrating 35 years of TLAP. So we've been in this for a while. So by saying that, I'm saying to simply explain that we've gathered a lot of resources and referrals for licensed professionals, whether that be counselors, psychiatrists, inpatient, outpatient. We have a running list and we're still adding to that list and we're still keeping that list up to date. So if you were to call and say, hey, I'm a Dallas attorney, I'm struggling with anxiety and depression. I've never experienced this before, or maybe I've experienced it before and I want to get on top of it. I need a counselor. We find a list of counselors in your area. It is up to you for you to determine who that counselor will be, but we ensure that we give you multiple options so that you're not feeling like you're just stuck with choosing that one person. If those list of professionals, as we know, counselors are very popular these days over the last few years. With people requesting, which is great. That means you're keeping us in business, right? But we do also offer alternative links like Psychology Today, Headway, and all of that. If those lists of professionals maybe have a running list to where they won't take a client for the next 30 to 60 days, which can happen. But I'll come back to the the inpatient facility because there's important information there. We also partner with a company where it provides in-the-moment counseling. What that is, if you were to call in the middle of the night, which we get 1 a.m. calls, 3 a.m. calls, and say, hey, I'm struggling with symptoms of PTSD and I really need to talk to someone right now. And that's just an example. We can connect you to a counselor in the moment. It's for free. You can use that anytime. You can use it more than once. The only caveat that I tell people is that if you use the in-the-moment counseling program more than once, you may not talk to the same counselor. But again, they've worked with us. They understand it's TLAP. We like to remain confidential. So you don't have to share any of your personal information, just what you're struggling with, and they'll talk you through it. And they can also provide additional resources as well. We also have local support groups and resources. So one of the main support groups, which actually started right before TLAP started and how TLAP got started, is Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers. This group is in all of the major cities throughout Texas. So we think about Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, so on and so forth. They meet via Zoom, and this is a support group specifically for lawyers, law students, and judges. A lot of times people who are struggling with mental health or substance-related issues do not want to go to AA in fear of maybe potentially run into one of their clients, right? Or just run into someone that they don't want to know what they're struggling with. So this group was established specifically for this profession. And you can call us for that information. You can also go on our website. All of the Zoom meetings and where they're located is available, and they meet every single week. We also have the student support sessions. This is specifically for law students who need just that additional help, need to have a longer conversation than just a quick phone call and an email with resources. Sometimes, like I stated earlier, they just don't have the answers. They don't know what they're struggling with. They don't know how to articulate that. They don't even know how to begin that conversation with their deans. And so being able to like help them navigate this process and still offer those resources, right? But just give them a little bit more support on the front end has really, we've seen has been really beneficial. And again, we tend to get more people calling about the support sessions either during orientation or when they're prepping for the bar. We also have one-to-one local peer support. What this is that we've worked with several thousands of attorneys over the last 35 years. And over time, because of the support that TLAP offered them, they in turn want to volunteer for TLAP. And so if someone wants to call and say, hey, I've been going to AA, but I feel like I need more, we try to connect them with a peer in their area. And what that is just a confidant, a friend, a peer that can help them navigate this time in their lives. They're not a counselor. They're not an AA, what's the word, AA support, I can't think of the word right, sober coach, that's what it is. They're not a sober coach. They are simply a person to help you get more connected into the community and build your own community. A lot of success stories we had over the last few years is not just because they called TLAP, it's because they were able to establish a community. And due to that community, that's part of the reason why they remain sober, or that's the reason why they didn't go through with those suicidal thoughts. Community is so important. So if you feel like you need a local peer support, please reach out to us. We also have self-care information, CLE, and wellness videos. We have 2 wellness meetings each month, the second Monday of each month, and the 4th Wednesday of each month, which the 4th Wednesday is the one that I host. And we talk about an array of topics. We talk about anxiety, depression, imposter syndrome, being a caregiver while you're working in the profession. Our next one is actually this 4th Wednesday of this month, where we're going to be interviewing Terry Bentley Hill, if anyone knows her. She has an amazing story about being in some ways, a survivor of 2 people, her husband and one of her children, who both lost their lives to suicide. And how she's going to discuss like the after effects of that, and how it's important to just notice the things that they may not notice themselves. And she's been discussing this topic for years. And so we have, again, various topics each month. Other things is opportunities to help other lawyers, which is the volunteering aspect, and then our Sharon Crowley Trust. So a lot of people have never heard of our Sharon Crowley Memorial Trust, but Sharon and Crowley are 2 men who founded TLAP. They are the reasons why TLAP exists in the first place. And they created this trust specifically for the legal community, lawyers, law students, and judges who cannot afford to pay for mental health and substance related, which it's all mental health related issues. You can get up to $3,000 for outpatient counseling and medication. You can get up to $4,000 for intensive outpatient treatment and medication, and up to $10,000 for inpatient treatment. How to qualify for this trust: you either do not have insurance, you have insurance, but it doesn't cover mental health issues. You have it, it covers it, but you can't afford to pay the copay or deductible. That's how you qualify for the trust. We do not say yes or no, you're qualified. We actually send that application to our board trustees and they approve the application. But we usually get a response in 24 to 48 hours, sometimes in the next hour, depending on the time that we send it. But we always tell people that the trust, we try to maintain a one-time use, because we want everyone to be able to benefit from this trust if there is a need for it. But another thing that I do want to mention with the inpatient treatment is that our colleague, as well as professional with TLAP, he has gone around Texas and talked to a lot of treatment facilities. And if anyone knows anything about inpatient treatment, it could be $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. And some of these treatment facilities have decided to accept just the $10,000 for our trust for inpatient for 30 to 60 days, which that's absolutely amazing. and a lot of people can benefit from this. So if you or you know someone who needs that resource, please reach out to us. We want to use the money. It's showing that there's a need there.
That's fantastic. And, you know, Oishu, you and I talked offline about that trust. And I told you I was really surprised by the number, only because, you know, when you break that down to a counseling hour, that depending on how often you need or want to go over the course of a year, that could be sessions that could go an entire year. That could be 6 months if you're if you're bi-monthly. I mean, that's really helpful. And, you know, one thing I wanted to have you mention as an LPC, you know, the free one thing I want to debunk is the expense behind seeking like hourly or weekly counseling treatment. I, you know, my wife is an LPC. I know what her rate is. I have monthly sessions. I know what my rate is. My rate's higher. There's other resources that people can seek out. And if you can speak on that a little bit, that'd be great.
Absolutely. And I also have a private practice, so I'm sure my rate is probably different from both of you all.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
counseling in general for a licensed professional counselor who may be just starting out, the price could be from $100 to $250, right? It depends on the experience that that person has and the specialty and certification. Some therapists do specialize in certain things. Like my focus is trauma, grief, relationship issues, but not everyone focuses on them. But when it comes to counseling, there's an array of things that you can do. There's companies like Headway and other platforms to where if you have insurance, you can go through your insurance, pay a monthly rate, and you can have as many counseling sessions as you want per month. But then you also have where if you don't have insurance and you have to pay out of pocket, there's a fee for that. But one thing that a lot of people don't talk about, and I don't know if it's always great for a counselor's perspective to discuss it, is a sliding scale. I do get calls sometimes to where a person said, oh, I have a counselor, but she's increased her rate, or I can't pay the full price anymore. And I'm like, well, the first thing is to discuss like, hey, is there a sliding scale available? I've been working with you for 6 months. I don't want to change to a different counselor. Can we talk about that? And some counselors are willing to do that. So it's important to advocate for yourself and certainly have those conversations on what you can and cannot afford. Yes, you're always going to see that price on the screen first, but have that conversation. Do those free 15-minute consultations. Most counselors offer that. If you've never been to counseling before and you call a counselor, most of them say, hey, let's check in for 15 minutes. Let's discuss what your needs are. And from there, that's the time to also discuss pay. But insurance is helpful. If you have a copay, typically that's all you would have to pay. It's usually $25, $30 per session as opposed to paying the full amount. And of course, the counselor will get paid through the insurance company. But again, I was just
No, sorry, go ahead.
no, it's okay. I was just going to say, but again, if you're a person who has to pay cash because, and we see this a lot with law students, is that they are no longer on their parents' insurance and they can't work a full-time job or work at all. So they typically utilize the $3,000 for those counseling sessions.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And, you know, one joke that my wife and I usually make is that if the counselor you reach out to first is at capacity, they'll have 15 others that they can refer you out to. So I appreciate that. And there was a question that someone asked. We will make those slides available, the TLAP program. We've got about 15 minutes left. Ashley, I wanted to make sure that you had enough time to talk about what Barnes and Thornburg has been doing, because, you know, when I found out specifically about y'all's firm and what resources that you've made available to your associates and to your partners and to your legal professionals, I was really excited. So I just wanted to open it up to you. Tell me about what Barnes and Thornburg does and how you've responded to the mental health concerns in the legal community that we've talked about.
Yeah, sure. And thanks again for having me. You know, just in full transparency, like many other lawyers in the nearly 10 years I've been practicing, and honestly, even during law school, I have experienced very high levels of stress and anxiety surrounding my career and my path to partnership and all of that. And so just sort of knowing that all of these awesome resources are available and that I'm not alone has really helped me specifically a lot. Like I said, just going through my experiences. And so now back to the question. So my firm, Barnes and Thornburg, is an Am Law 100 firm. We are ranked 75th in the nation right now as far as profitability goes. And even with all of that and over 850, professionals working here, we still take mental health really seriously, and it's something that I'm proud to be a part of. So on my slide here, you can just see our Dallas culture is to develop and maintain a culture of excellence and increase engagement and passion and energy. So that's sort of our why, right? And so as part of this, in 2018, the firm signed this well-being pledge. And that was sort of based on a task force that the ABA put together in 2016 to research these issues and really put statistics together. And then in 2017, the following year, they put together a 7-point well-being framework. And that's in regards to certain research on stress, anxiety, depression, alcohol abuse, substance abuse, all of that. And so after this session, I think Dallas is going to share with everybody a PDF, which is a well-being toolkit that is published and available to everybody on the ABA website. It has some really great tips and tricks. It's not a boring read. I was reading it the other day while I was getting my car washed and sitting there waiting for it. So, print it out and have it available. It's really intriguing. And even though it's 7 or so years old, it's still very relevant. So I was just going to read the introduction to that toolkit because I thought it was interesting and pretty valid to what we're talking about here. So it says, being a lawyer is an immense privilege. To serve these crucial functions, many lawyers work very hard and take on hefty responsibilities that often have major consequences for clients. The demands that flow from this privilege can mount and threaten our well-being. When we ignore signs of distress, the quality of our lives and work can plummet. For too many lawyers, this is what has already occurred. A 2016 study of nearly 13,000 practicing attorneys found that between 21 and 30% qualify as problem drinkers. About 28% experience some level of depressive symptoms, and 18% experienced elevated anxiety. There's also evidence of suicide, work addiction, sleep deprivation, job dissatisfaction, work-life conflict, incivility, a narrowing of value so that profit continues to predominate, and chronic loneliness. So it sounds pretty bleak, right? But due to these studies, as I mentioned, my firm was an inaugural signatory to the ABA's Wellbeing Pledge about 6 years ago. And every year we continue to renew our commitment to that pledge, considering wellness just such a high priority for us and our lawyers. So as you can see on the screen, the pledge states as follows: recognizing that high levels of problematic substance use and mental health distress present a significant challenge for the legal profession, and acknowledging that more can and should be done to improve the health and well-being of lawyers, we, the attorneys of Barnes and Thornburg, hereby pledge our support for this innovative campaign and will work to adopt and prioritize its 7-point framework for building a better future. And so then that takes us to the 7-point framework, which again is published on the ABA's website, and which I just pulled into this slideshow, where you can sort of see how they are framing this and how they are providing this type of information to law firms to be able to implement these sorts of things. And so, right, provide enhanced and robust education first and foremost, right? And then reduce the expectation of alcohol at events or whatever that might look like. If you have a bar cart, you might think twice, because what if there are attorneys struggling and they don't want to see a bar cart when they're in the middle of doing important legal work? partnering with outside providers like TLAP and others, providing confidential access to resources, of course, and other coaches, developing proactive policies and protocols to assess treatment and accommodation requests like Camille brought up, showing that our organization's core values are surrounded by well-being, and then using the pledge and just sort of staying committed to it. That is sort of where they stand. And so in connection with the pledge and keeping with this sort of 7-point framework, as of 2019, my firm decided to take the initiative to bring on a full-time performance coach to support firm members with stress resilience, personal and professional growth, and also being available on an immediate basis if a teammate is actually in crisis. So similar to TLAP, we have professional coaches that are also available to our people, and so they can be accessed as frequently as needed. It's available to all attorneys as well as paralegals, all C-suite members and directors, free of charge to the participants. So we talk about, hourly rates, and therapists have hourly rates. And so when you really add up the amount of money that my firm is committing towards this to offer 850 plus professionals free access to a professional as often as they want, it's just incredible. And I'll go into the why in a second, but these coaches, one of them came to Dallas. We have two now. So since 2019, we brought on another coach because it was so well received. And so now we actually have two coaches, and there's sort of three buckets that they're available for. It's therapy, emotional, relational therapy, including past trauma. You can also talk to them about life coaching outside of work. I want to succeed, and I have all these other initiatives I want to drive. They'll talk to you about that. And then also, of course, executive coaching. So, any issues you might be struggling with or career goals that they can help you achieve. It's just great. But obviously important to note, the communications are all 100% confidential, and the firm does not have any visibility into who is seeing them or how often. Something for everybody to think about, and ours is actually located up in the Midwest, and so they offer Zoom as an option, which is also really nice since we have 22 offices around the country. So a few more, if that's not already enough, we also have partnered with a company called Mindful by Life XT, which provides monthly newsletters that provide free courses, meditations, and then open access to their online library for other resources. And then finally, we also, even as a big law firm, offer 16 full weeks of paternity leave, both to mothers and fathers, regardless of what your spouse is doing on their end as far as paternity leave. So another great initiative to realize that people need to take that time to be with their children, to help get through that time and come back and be stronger than ever.
Sorry, I muted. And again, I want to emphasize that Barnes and Thornburg, obviously they have the resources for this type of initiative, and, a barrier to entry for small firms could just be cost. But what I think a bigger inhibitor, or an inhibitor that should be discussed more, is not so much cost, but just frame of mind. So from your perspective, Ashley, in working with this program and seeing it be effective, what would you tell the broader legal community to take on a similar tact? How would you, what would your pitch be to convince them to take it as seriously as your firm has?
Yeah, I think, Camille hit on this really well, and everyone sort of asked, why would a law firm be incentivized to do all of this? They're just an employer, right? But really, truly, I think it does come down to the main factor being ROI, a return on investment. Firms make money off of profitability. So when they meet their employees in the middle to allow them to ultimately be more productive, to put out the best type of work product, then at the end, they are increasing their profits, and they are seeing lower turnover rates as well. So, we all know that what burnout is and the importance of, you know, recognizing the side effects that come from something like that. So I think another factor that's sort of obvious is just sometimes it comes down to good people help people in need. And so being mindful of who is on the management, who is making that decision, and then, you know, sometimes taking initiative to get there. You know, we're all able to make some change. And so you know, I just again want to just say it's not a weakness to seek out professional help or even just the ear of a trusted advisor or mentor, helping just to talk through and work through that, because we've all been there and professionals know how to help you, and it really does. It is a sign of strength at the end of the day. So just really quickly to kind of touch on some of those barriers, you talked about the obvious financial barriers, and then we've also, you know, limited capital or human resources. So maybe we have an idea, but we don't have enough people to implement it. Maybe this idea that all this non-billable time talking to a therapist is taking away from billable time, right? And how are you ever going to make that up? Which is, in my opinion, very silly. You know, and just this old school approach, like, you know, every man and woman for themselves. And, you know, we have to have this separation of work and personal life, and what goes on out there shouldn't come here, you know, leave your stuff at the door. And I think we've all just come to realize that that's not a workable framework.
I agree. And, you know, again, my goal, in fact, the reason I joined the wellness committee in the first place, aside from just caring about my own mental health and the mental health of my friends and my network, is I really wanted to find a way to convey this type of messaging. So I'm very appreciative of Barnes and Thornburg's tact. I know there are other firms that I just didn't call up someone from their office to be on this panel. I know other firms care about the issues as much as you and your firm does. But what I would challenge firms to do, and the partners and the powers that be at those firms, is to be more vocal about it and to be more willing to assert the importance of these issues, not only within your firm, but to the bar, to the people that maybe are less aware or less learned about what a mental health issue could be, what forms it could take, how it can affect everyone on the totem pole at your firm, and frankly, you know, what it could mean for everyone to feel respected in this state of mind or the condition that they're in. We are very much out of time. I just wanted to wrap up first by thanking the panel that came in from their different corners of knowledge and just given the information that we talked about today. To the attendees here or anyone that watches down the line, you know, I've told people, I've told my close friends, I've told my network, I've told strangers, like, if you just need any type of like support or any type of just jumping off point or even a conversation starter about how to access mental health resources, or even just a bit of encouragement to take the issue seriously, I am very much an open-ended conversation starter on that, obviously, and you are free to call me anytime. I would encourage people to reach out to TLAP if they just need to have a confidential ear. But if anything, I encourage people to just challenge themselves to take it seriously if you're just learning about it, or to talk to your firm about it and see what resources that they might have to offer you that you didn't already know about. So anyway, I appreciate everyone for joining today, and yeah, have a great day. And I hope to see you at the next CLE on this important set of topics. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.